Black Widow. This is the new Marvel film. It was originally slated to come out in May of 2020, but a little thing happened. You might have heard about it. It was in the news for a little bit, then went away. But now it's both on Disney Plus and in theaters. I watched it on Disney Plus. This is the first Marvel movie to be released in 2 years. Yes, I know we've had the Disney Plus stuff, some TV stuff, but this is the first big screen film that Marvel has put out there since Spider-Man Far From Home. I have seen it, and you know what? It's good. It's a good movie. It is not in the top tier of like the best of Marvel, but it's a solid flick. Marvel, as generic as they can be sometimes, as formulaic as they can be sometimes, they are reliable. I mean, they make a lot of good movies, and I'm really glad I watched this. I think it's a good film, and I recommend people go out and see it. This is one of those films where everything I liked about it is what I expected I would like about it, and everything I didn't like about it is what I expected I wouldn't like about it. I think that there's a lot of good things in this movie, and we'll start there. Movie looks good. The CG is good for the most part. Marvel spares no expense, right? This is $200 million film. The money is on the screen. I think some of the action is pretty solid, but what makes this film work, and it's what makes any comic book film, any film in general work, is I like the characters. You know, I think Scarlett Johansson is really good in this, and she's been good as this character, because I'll be honest, I don't think the character of Natasha Romanoff from the beginning has ever been that well written. I think she's elevated the material, and I think she does again here. She's solid in this, but who steals the show is the supporting cast. David Harbour is great as what's the Red Guardian. This guy just seems like he's having the time of his life, and this is a character actor who'd been around Hollywood for a long time. Now he's getting bigger roles. Obviously, he was like the main guy in Stranger Things, and people love him there. He's hosted SNL. He's great, but the character, the actress who steals the show in this is Florence Pugh. Florence Pugh, believe it or not, I don't think I've ever seen her in anything else. I know she's been in a bunch of stuff. Everyone tells me to watch Midsummer. I haven't. Everyone tells me to watch Little Women. I haven't. The only stuff I've seen of her is those Instagram cooking things that she does, which I think are adorable, but she's excellent in this. And I have been worried about where Marvel's going to go from here, because that original Avengers lineup, I think we're going to look back at that era from the first Avengers all the way to Endgame, and we're going to remember it the way people remember, like, seeing the Beatles on the Sgt. Pepper tour. Like, that was just a perfectly cast, perfectly performed, perfectly executed string of films with these characters and these actors that we all loved. And I've wondered, how are they going to move on from that? How are they going to replace that? And you have somebody like Florence Pugh here, who is a legitimate movie star. She's my favorite character in this. I mean, if there's a minor complaint I have about this movie, it's that I think this is almost more her movie than it is Scarlett Johansson's. I mean, she really steals the show. The movie has what I think all movies should have and forget to have sometimes. There's an element of fun to it. I was never bored in this movie, and most movies bore me, and that's why I think so many people connect with Marvel films, is that they rarely ever drag. You are engaged pretty much the whole way through, and you enjoy watching it, and that's like the biggest compliment I can give this film, is I enjoyed the experience of watching it. But it is not perfect. I don't think it's as good as Endgame. It's not. It's not as good as Infinity War. It's not as good as Winter Soldier, Civil War. It's in like that second, maybe even third tier. But even Marvel's like third tier is still better than 90% of movies. There is a lot of action, like I said, and some of it is good, but a lot of it is just kind of generic. And for a film that is so heavily reliant on action, I would have expected to see a little bit more life to the action sequences at points. The big complaint that a lot of people seem to have, and rightfully so, is that this movie has a villain problem, and it's something that Marvel dealt with a lot in their earlier films. Then it seemed like the end of Phase 2, early Phase 3, they fixed that, and we saw Killmonger and Hela and the Vulture and Thanos, one of the greatest cinematic villains of all time, Thanos, and now we're kind of back to that problem. The Taskmaster is not a bad villain, but they're an underwritten villain. You feel like there was a lot more to that character that we could have and should have seen. Now, the movie is not about the villains necessarily, but at the same time, you would have liked to have seen a little bit more to that character, because that's a character a lot of people like from the comics. It's a character that was in the Spider-Man PS4 game from several years ago that I thought was really good. They had more development there than they do here. Just kind of a lame C-D+ villain in this movie. The story is not particularly gripping. They make up for it in many ways with the characters, but the biggest problem I have with this film, and it's the problem that I expected I would have, is that I just don't think it really needs to exist. Like, this movie would have been better off coming out 5 years ago, and I've heard people make that complaint, but they're justified, because in my opinion, similar to the arc that we saw out of Bruce Banner in the Avengers movies, Natasha Romanoff's superhero arc was completed in the Avengers films. It was completed in Avengers Endgame. I didn't need to see another edition on the further misadventures of Natasha Romanoff. And watching this, it feels like a DLC for a video game. Now, that's not a bad thing. I enjoyed watching it. Like I said, I was never bored, but one of the things that really makes these Marvel movies great when they're at their best is that you really get attached to the characters. The final hour of Avengers Endgame doesn't work because it has a bunch of stuff blowing up. It works because the people who are around all the stuff that's blowing up are characters you really, really care about. And Natasha Romanoff is not that gripping of a character. Like I said, I think Scarlett Johansson elevates the material, but I don't think it's necessarily a great character. And watching this, I didn't really feel like I learned a whole lot. 7 out of 10. It's a good movie. It's a good summer movie. I recommend people watch it, but it didn't blow me away, and I didn't really expect it to. It kind of met my expectations in that way. So you can follow me on Twitter at Castellani2014. Hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button. Let's get those watch hours up, up, up. I work for Barstool now. That's pretty darn cool, if you ask me. All right, thank you very much for watching, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Peace and happiness.